This week on A Brief History Conspiracy.
Evidence of the Anunnaki.
Sweet. So our timeline for this episode is 200,000 years ago roughly, when mankind was kind of created to become slaves by the Anunnaki, which we now know to be true. To around 12,000 years ago, the deluge, which is when we think they buggered off.
Yeah.
So, and this whole evidence now is about the evidence of the Anunnaki. So what we can see that might still be left today. So not just the stories, what is actually left that tells us this is actually true.
Yep.
So, I mean, first of all, we've got to go Sumerian. That's where Sitchin got all this information from.
Yeah, and the clay tablets, the cuneiform tablets that the Sumerians...
First recorded writings
left
ever.
for us, yep.
Really. It's a little bit out of our chronology, because this was about 6,000 years ago, 6,500 years ago.
Yep.
We're going to make the argument in other videos that this is the first writing that we still have now. I don't genuinely believe it was the first language.
No.
Personally.
I believe we've been communicating. We've had our current brain capacity for 250,000 years, same as it is now. So we've probably had similar language and writing skills for that entire period. It's just most of it's probably been lost.
It's been destroyed, isn't it? So,
yeah.
But we'll make that argument in later videos. The other area we're going to talk about now is Michael Tellinger, who is an interesting guy.
Yeah, very interesting South African. Yeah.
Yes, where you're from.
Indeed.
And the thing I really like about this guy, he considers himself a lone crusader, doesn't he, really?
He does seem a bit like a lone crusader, yeah, very much so.
He knows the truth, we're all fools, and he's out finding this stuff. And he comes out with some really interesting things, but he does go a little off left field for me at times as well.
Yeah, he does.
Let's get into this anyway. So first of all, Adam's calendar. Is that the easiest place to start?
Yeah, probably the best place to start, isn't it?
Because it's supposed to be the start of mankind.
Well, yes.
So Adam's calendar, if you don't know, it's a bit like Stonehenge. It's in South Africa. It is ancient. It was supposed to be built with some dolerite stones, which is again like Stonehenge. They found a site where they really, really wanted to build this thing, and then they went, this stone, nah.
And then ship the stone in from several hundred miles
away.
away.
Yeah, move the stone in from hundreds and hundreds of miles away. I don't know if there's some specific thing about dolerite. Is it magnetic or is it thing? I don't really know anything about it, but
yeah, I mean, I think well, one, it's a very hard stone, isn't it, to work,
which hence it still exists.
Yes. Yep.
I think Tellinger talks about that, doesn't he? He talks about how difficult it would be to actually break this stone or work this stone.
Yep.
And he said even with today's technology, it would be difficult to. And I think he says, well,
even with diamond-tipped blades on power tools, you're still difficult to shape and work the stone. So
because the modern, I should say that the mainstream science, which we're going to go, I love using the mainstream word. Like I say, the mainstream fools believe this site to be about 12,000 years old. We're talking Göbekli Tepe sort of time again. Tellinger argues it's actually probably much, much older. Well, he's arguing basically it's 200,000 years old at least. And he talks about the dolerite being worn and broken, doesn't he? There's evidence for that.
Yeah, there's a layer, isn't there, of is it microbial growth over the top of the stones that he uses as evidence that the thickness of that microbial growth and how quickly the thickness, how quickly it actually layers over time. The thickness indicates that it's much older than
the thing is, he has a point.
The mainstream.
And mainstream science has got a bit of form on underestimating these things. Let's be honest. Göbekli Tepe is the perfect example of that. They said we have no ability to make to have this sort of technology, and then we said Göbekli Tepe turns up and go, ooh, it's at least 12,000 years old.
I think the main problem is that any new archaeological evidence that's found today, the evidence is then fitted into our current timeline that we believe things occurred.
People struggle to sort of realise
rather than adjusting the timeline.
Yeah.
From the evidence.
Yeah.
So we have a preconceived timeline that we're fitting the evidence that we find into. And I think that's where the mainstream is probably going significantly wrong with some of the dating of some of these old sites that, to me, cannot be dated correctly.
So then you've got other places like Jericho City, though, that is another good example of this, that they genuinely believed is the longest lived in city in history. They believed it's been lived in since about 6000 BC. Recent studies have found that this goes much further. It goes back to 9000 BC that people have lived in civilization.
That's continuous living.
Yeah, archaeological
in
evidence has come up recently. You have to wonder how much more archaeology is under the city that we're never going to see, you know? But that,
you can't
again,
get to.
goes back to Göbekli Tepe times. Again, a time when they didn't believe we were still hunter-gatherers, basically. And now we're starting to realise that actually we weren't. You know, at the end of the last ice age, we were building cities, we were building structures that are very complex.
Yep.
I wouldn't have no idea how to build some of the things they're talking about Adam's calendar, and Göbekli Tepe, for example, these T-shaped structures.
Yep.
The local tribes in Africa believe that Adam's calendar is the birthplace of man, and it's actually where Adam and Eve came from. They believe it's the Garden of Eden.
Yep.
You were saying about how tribes from other places have come across.
Yeah, there was some in the Michael Tellinger stuff. There was some of the shamans of the Native American Indian tribes.
This is the Hopi tribe again.
The Hopi tribe, I think it's linked to, and some other tribes actually went and visited South Africa, particularly Adam's calendar, as they believe that when man goes through the last age, the fifth age, we will then suffer a massive catastrophe and be reset back to
this is something I know
Stone
the Hopi
Age,
tribe,
basically, again.
Yeah. Sometimes the Hopi tribe believe that we've been through these. We're in the fifth age of man at the moment. There's been 4 disasters which have nearly wiped us out, and we're now in the fifth age, and we're about. Oh no, sorry, we're in the fourth age now, and we're about to go into the fifth age.
I think, yeah. And
they're expecting this massive reset. They think the last one was this Younger Dryas event, which we're going to talk about in a few weeks. And that was the beginning of the fourth age of man. There's actually quite a lot of evidence to show that's probably true. So, like I say, at the Younger Dryas event, we went down to 10,000.
And everything seems to ancient civilization. When you research into it, everything seems to link back to the Younger Dryas event and back to about this time period of about 10 to 12,000 years ago.
This possible reset of civilization, isn't it?
Which means that the climate change that occurred was very significant at that point.
I think there's a big point as well to say that these big cities arrive, and it's a change of environment. Our environment today, where the Middle East is sandy and quite arid, isn't what it was like at the end of the Younger Dryas event. It was green and lush and lovely. North Africa was green and lush and because the cold had come from the north, and Britain was not a nice place to live, but that sort of temperate zone moved south, so that's where we flourished. And as the Younger Dryas ended and the Ice Age ended, the temperate zone moved northward. Europe became the easier place to live. The more resources you have, the easier it is to live. The more you can spend time on other things like building castles and things.
Yep.
I think you can see this where civilizations flourish. Anyways, is environmentally linked.
Oh, of course, yeah, definitely so.
And where we're talking about here is where it was environmentally flourishing was North Africa. So you can understand that there would have been stuff going on there.
You can also, I suppose, understand as well with the advance of the desertification of the Sahara and of the Middle East. You start to see people move away. So there's a lot of migration into southern Africa from northern Africa. Yeah. As the deserts were forming, which I suppose nicely links into the Dogon tribe, which are a tribe that supposedly were originally from North Africa that migrated southwards as the Sahara got bigger, and in their mythology they speak of their of their gods that created them as having come from the star system Sirius.
Okay, which is again possibly what we're talking about.
Their mythology also speaks of it being a tertiary star system,
which we didn't know about.
Until the late 80s. Yeah. But their mythology goes back thousands of years and describes
it's
a tertiary star
to
system.
Tribe, isn't it? We've got to do a thing on them. Because there's so many of these tribes that you think. I think we talked about this in our introduction episode. That there's a lot of these tribes about there that once you strip away the mythology, you get this information like this serious thing.
There's some basic underlying science.
But it's science that we didn't even realise 50 years ago.
No.
But then we now we look back and go, oh, that's bloody irritatingly accurate.
Yeah. Too accurate to be a guess.
If we go back to the Adam's calendar though, just quickly, because we have wandered off there a little bit,
sorry.
as we tend to do. Yeah. Fuck it, Sasha.
Yep.
So one of the things that Tellinger talks about in this is these 3 pyramids, and when he marks them on a map, he does that golden spiral we talked about in our Mars episode.
Yes.
Which between the face on Mars and
the face in Sidonia and the pyramids in that region.
There's this similar golden spiral connecting them. Unfortunately, the evidence for the pyramids seems quite limited. He's got a selfie of himself at Adam's calendar, and in the background there's an arrow going. These are they just look like 3 hills to me, but maybe we can do some research on that. I've tried to find other research on that.
Maybe with
a lot of people
excavation.
talking about it, but there's no real evidence. I'd like to see even somebody just walk up to them and go and have a look, but they don't even seem to have done that. But it is interesting that they geographically seem to line up to the Adam's calendar, and Adam's calendar itself seems to line up with the pyramids in Giza. They seem to be along the same longitude.
Yes.
Which is again interesting, and again something we're going to talk about in later episodes about when we sort of got to talk about Atlantis and these sorts of things, that there seems to be objects and constructions related to each other all over the world that
the ley lines and such. Yes.
Along longitude and latitude, which these people shouldn't have known anything about. So
no.
Interesting. So actually in the Bible again which talks about Adam and Eve, and one of the things God told Adam, one of the things he would find at the Garden of Eden was gold and resources, and it would be, it's this utopia to live. It just seemed like an odd thing for God to mention. Oh, by the way, mate, some gold there. It just seems like, why was God telling Adam about gold?
Yeah, all powerful, all wise, all knowing, just can't handle money or gold.
Yeah, well, he seems to want gold. You want that gold, you want to dig that up and hang it around your neck, and then when I turn up for it, give it me. Because maybe God wasn't God. Maybe God was the Anunnaki. Because the Anunnaki seem to be interested in gold, and obviously these places we're talking about are still today where we dig up most of our gold.
Yeah, most of the gold mines are in South Africa. Yeah.
So the other thing is the Great Zimbabwe, which is some ruins in Zimbabwe, weirdly.
Yeah. Well, Zimbabwe being next to South Africa, it kind of makes sense that they're. What was it? There's basically there's some kind of ancient ruins that are supposedly called Earth Station 1, which was supposedly the Anunnaki's first base,
which we discussed in our first video in this series, and I make the link between that and Thunderbirds.
You did.
Randomly, that's how my brain works. I'm not overly impressed by the Great Zimbabwe ruins. Mainstream science says again, that these ruins are only about 2,000 years old. They're not massive. They're not huge ruins. They look quite modern when you look at them. They look like medieval.
Yeah, and they haven't got the megalithic blocks that some of the other sites have got around the world that indicate an advanced cutting and positioning technique for the blocks.
You could say that's because it's the first city, but I'm not convinced by the Great Zimbabwe. It's an old ruin. It's still interesting.
Yeah.
The big thing he talks about though is these cattle kraals.
Yes.
And these things are interesting.
Very.
So they've been back from 1891. Somebody called Theodore Bent sort of found these things, and basically, again, mainstream science says they're
cattle corrals for holding penning cattle. I assume
holding the cattle for you. It's fair enough. It's impressive that they were doing this. in Africa a couple of thousand years ago.
No, yeah.
Because again, the mainstream science says these are only a few thousand years old. Tellinger says that they're at least 50,000 years old.
Yep.
Roger Summers in the late 80s said that he thinks there's actually more like 20,000 of these things, whereas Theodore Bent said there was only about 4,000. Michael Tellinger himself estimates there are 10 to 20 million of these things. But he doesn't really give a great deal of evidence on how he got to that number. It seems to be a guess.
Although from looking at Google Maps of South Africa, I can confirm that there are a lot of these cattle kraals littered across the South African countryside, if you could call it countryside.
10 to 20 million, though. Okay, if we believe that they are for cattle,
yep.
If there's 10 million of these things,
yep.
Right? Say you only hold 100 cattle in each one.
Yep.
That's 1 billion.
Yeah, it's 1 billion cattle.
Right. Say you're not only using them all. So say even if it's only 500 million, that's still a third of all the cattle we have today.
Yes.
We only have about 1.4 billion cattle today.
And a third of those were all centralised in South Africa.
Where the population of the planet was only 10 or 20,000.
The sheer number of these cattle kraals
It's insane.
Would indicate that there was a much larger population there, or they weren't used for penning cattle.
100,000.